In Squid Game Season 1, we're introduced to the Recruiter. He's this enigmatic and mysterious person who's meant to be friendly, aside from the slapping of course. He serves as a primary method to get people to join the Squid Games, preying on people vulnerable to gambling by playing Deckji, offering money if they win. When people lose, of course, he offers to slap them in exchange for a second chance. This kind of briefly shows us how players of this game will keep playing to win money no matter the cost, which is kind of like a small preview to what the show has to offer. What's interesting is he's basically the only person who doesn't wear a mask who works for the games. Minor spoilers for Squid Game. Squid Game Season 2 came out recently, and if you haven't seen it or heard of Squid Game, maybe you live under a rock. But if you live under a rock, do people care about you less? As I watched the masked soldiers die in the final episodes, I was rooting for the players and cheering when the masked people got shot. Squid Game was an intense show, and I think it does something similar to what Hunger Games does, which I'll talk about later. The masked soldiers in Squid Game Season 1 are these cold, mysterious entities. There appears to be some sort of hierarchy among them. The circle guards seem to do tedious and mundane tasks like incinerating bodies or dangerous jobs of the like. The triangles are somewhere in the middle and have artillery. The squares are at the top of the soldier hierarchy, and there's usually one present. These shapes help identify them in a simple and interesting way. I find it interesting that before the first game, none of the armed triangle guards appear, but after the first game, the armed triangle guards appear, as though they wanted to keep it a secret that they would die in the next games by not showing the guns. Behind these masks are real people who have definitely grown extremely accustomed to their trade. The mask makes them feel more like robots designed to fulfill tasks, and not like people. In this scene from Season 1, one of the guards is forced by one of the players who holds him at gunpoint to take his mask off. He does, and it turns out the guy behind this menacing appearance is just a young kid with a blank expression plastered on his face. The player who held the masked man at gunpoint ends his life, probably because he has nothing else to do, and the young kid behind the mask doesn't even flinch. This is an interesting moment too, because the kid has clearly seen it all. He's seen the most violent sides of humanity to the point where even upon taking the mask off, he still stares emotionlessly, refusing to flinch at the guy ending his life. The frontman shoots at the soldier afterward. This wasn't really meant to have us empathize with the soldier's death, but was explaining to us and reminding us that these soldiers are real people and not just lifeless robots. An interesting subplot in Season 2 expands on this. We get to learn about one of the masked soldiers. One of the higher up masked men is trying to get organs from living humans and potentially sell these organs on the black market or something, probably against the will of the frontman, as well as other body parts. The girl that we follow as a soldier, named Noel, is someone we can empathize with. We get her backstory, and to many people, her situation is at least somewhat relatable. She was seemingly dehumanized by killing people in the Squid Game. However, because we see her face and we have her backstory, we have a little bit of empathy. Additionally, the subplot shows the soldiers purposefully not killing the players right away. The scenes where she finished off the players to ensure they don't live on and suffer as their organs get harvested shows her moral code, to kill players who would die anyway, to, as she said, put them out of their misery. But harvesting organs goes against her moral code, as I said, and she clearly views it as unethical. Any attempt that the other soldiers make to not kill the players right away and keep them alive in an agonizing state is usually met with her ending their suffering, with only a few scene exceptions. The interesting thing about this subplot in regards to what I was previously talking about is simply that in the first season and most of the second season, we don't really have much empathy for the guards, thanks in part to their masked appearance. I hope in the third season they show some resolution to this subplot, because humanizing these dehumanized soldiers really was an interesting choice, and Season 2 just didn't have enough episodes to show all the plots at once fully. The first season definitely showed these guards as menacing figures, with maybe a few glints of humanity shown in the frontman with the second season preceding it, but the second season shows conflict with the soldiers and shines some humanity on them, some of which in a cruel way of course, that they really are humans with real human emotions. Toward the end of the show, when large amounts of soldiers are dying, like I mentioned earlier, I didn't really empathize with them that much, especially compared to when a lot of players were dying earlier. It's easy to recognize these soldiers as just soldiers, and just as a force, not as humans. Let's talk about the Recruiter one more time. The Recruiter is of course meant to be seen as some unsuspecting businessman, and with his perhaps rather subtly unsettling actions, he's meant to be the bridge to get people to join the games. In the second season, as you probably know, his ideology is explained a little bit more. People that he hunts down for the Squid Game, as he says, are meant to die, as they serve no other purpose in the world. That's why the Dakji game is so interesting, because the very nature of it is meant to get people who are prone to gamble and to regain money at seemingly any cost. The chilling scene where he plays the game of Russian roulette is also an insightful end to his character. We get to see what he really thinks, and some people even suspect he put the bullet in the last chamber on purpose. Gi-hun tells the recruiter to admit that he is nothing but a dog fulfilling the wishes of those in charge of the game. The recruiter refuses to admit this, and with the opportunity to kill Gi-hun, follows through with the game and, well, you know the rest. It's interesting to think of the recruiter as wearing a mask too. This is going to sound a little bit corny, but perhaps his persona as the recruiter is meant to mask his true, cold self. But this cold and blank persona is perhaps meant to mask his true identity, his true traits. In a way, he wears two masks then. Many people point out how he shows two facial expressions at once, which is incredibly impressive on the actor's part. The left side, or his right side I guess, shows a neutral acceptance of what is to come, and a menacing persona, while on the other side shows him scared half to death. Though he's grown accustomed to people dying and getting tortured in the games, he was still scared and didn't want to admit that he really was their dog. Had he killed Gi-hun, he would live with the unbearable weight of believing himself to really be nothing more than subservient to those running the games. So moving on from Squid Game, let me ask you this. Do you like feeling plasma that burns at 30,000 degrees Celsius? Well, this is a common thing for Stormtroopers to deal with during wars. Stormtroopers are perhaps the perfect example of dehumanizations while wearing masks. Darth Vader's mask was meant to dehumanize him, but also provide some mystery. However, most Stormtroopers wear masks simply because they hide their face. Sure, they probably provide some kind of protection, clearly not much. They often wear these helmets in places where they don't need to. In fact, they wear these helmets everywhere. Stormtroopers, or any variant of soldier wearing a mask in Star Wars I guess, get shot left and right. These trooper masks are really cool and provide a cool atmosphere that only Star Wars could ever capture. But Star Wars, at least the main series I guess, isn't meant to be as violent as the players being killed in Squid Game for example. When there's an onslaught of Stormtrooper death, the movie wants to make you feel like the rebellion is winning and an incentive for you to cheer them on, even if they too were human. The Stormtroopers who are dying, that is. A potentially intriguing plot in The Force Awakens shows us one of the Stormtroopers, Finn. This could have been really interesting, and I'm not saying they did a bad job necessarily, though I would have much preferred if we got insight to the other Stormtroopers too, at least a bit more than we did, and how they're brainwashed and stuff. Maybe a bit more humanization of these completely dehumanized people. The thing is, if they fully leaned into dehumanizing the Stormtroopers, it probably would have convoluted the plot, and what's more, it wouldn't have been Star Wars. Thing is, people don't want to take Stormtrooper deaths seriously, and the ones who do may find great interest in reading the extended series with the comics and the books, where it goes more in detail on many different things. But Stormtroopers constantly dying is practically a staple, an icon of the main Star Wars series. There really was no need to humanize them, which is interesting in and of itself. Interesting enough, which I didn't really think about before, is people say the Empire is meant to resemble fascism, at least according to some fans, in a similar manner as 1933 to 1945 Germany. I don't want to say the word, so I'll just say that. If Star Wars meant you sympathize with the Stormtroopers, it would only take attention away from the whole entertainment of stopping this force. The one we were meant to care about is Darth Vader because he's Luke's father. Darth Vader's actually an interesting example. The mask provided an ominous feeling and a mystery to who he actually was. When he takes off the mask in the final movie, after we already know he is Luke's father, we kind of, I don't know if this is really a word, rehumanize him. It's cool that all along, Anakin was the chosen one, and in a way he brought balance back to the Force, so the prophecy remained true in the end. The first Hunger Games introduces us to the world, including the Peacekeepers, members of the Capitol meant to fulfill duties to keep each district in order. The first movie shows these Peacekeepers as these people who wear helmets, sure, but their full faces are exposed. This one is particularly interesting because they do show their faces in the first movie, but in the second movie, they actually purposefully hide their face. And by they, I mean the people who were in charge of costume design or writing, I don't know. This may be simply so you don't waste time thinking about the soldiers dying, and so you care less. The plot of the movies doesn't want you to be super concerned about these deaths, as the main focus is the districts obtaining their freedom and to show off the evil of the Capitol as a corporation. Adding some kind of subplot or simply showing these people's face would have convoluted the plot, just like it would have in Star Wars. The villains in Hunger Games, of course, do show their faces, the main ones at that, like President Snow. They are meant to be humanized, but meant to show a dark side of humanity, power, and greed. While I do think showing the Peacekeeper's face would have convoluted the plot potentially, I do actually think it could have been interesting. I don't know if the books did the same thing because I haven't read them, so if you've read the books, feel free to let me know in the comments. I'm sure you're probably wondering why I said the thing about living under a rock earlier. Well, maybe if someone lives under a rock, people care about them less because people can't see their face. As always, thanks for watching this Peak Stasis video, and I'll see you in the next one.